There is a snail in an early episode of Adventure Time waving at the camera. It appears on a wall, in a window, in the background of a scene that was already happening. It waves. The episode continues. You probably smiled when you saw it. It was cute. It was one of those small production details the show had. And then the episode ended, and you moved on without thinking about it again. The problem is that what you were looking at was not a cute snail waving. It was the Lich waving at you. The show's primary villain, the ancient extinction entity, the being that Adventure Time establishes as fundamentally unstoppable, was hidden inside the snail across multiple seasons. His possession of the snail predates by entire seasons the moment he uses it to free himself from the amber prison in mortal folly. He was simply there, watching, waving at you while Finn and Jake ran through their adventures. That is what the Adventure Time Iceberg actually is. Not a list of things you didn't know. A list of things you saw and didn't understand what you were seeing. The difference between those two things is the difference between learning a new fact and realizing that something you thought you understood has always been telling you something you didn't hear. Tonight, we go to the bottom, and when we get there, you'll see the show differently, not because you learn new things, but because you understand what you were already seeing. Subscribe if you haven't. It's free, and it keeps the channel alive. Let's start at the surface and go down. The surface is what everyone knows. The post-apocalyptic setting, Simon Petrikov becoming the Ice King, Finn as the last human in Oo, or at least that's what everyone thought, Princess Bubblegum ruling the Candy Kingdom, Marceline and her 1,000 years of history, Jake shape-shifting into anything, BMO as the adorable living game console that is basically the household pet. These are the facts the show tells you directly. They're the part of the iceberg above the water. They're what anyone who watched a few episodes knows. But even at the surface, there's something I want you to understand before we descend. The show hid its darkness inside its brightness from the very first frame. The title sequence, Adventure Time, come on, grab your friends, we'll go to very distant lands, shows Finn and Jake running through a landscape of ruins, collapsed structures, broken technology, the remains of a civilization that ended badly. The show tells you immediately, in every episode, before anything happens. You are watching what comes after everything ended, and then Finn runs through that landscape like it's the most fun place in the world. That is the show's design philosophy. The surface is real. What's below it is also real. Both are happening at the same time, and the show trusted you to notice. A lot of people didn't notice. A lot of people watched Adventure Time as a fun adventure cartoon, and it is. But simultaneously it's something else, and the iceberg is the right way to organize that something else. Let's go to the first layer below the surface, the snail. I have to go back to the snail, because it deserves more time than I gave it in the opening. The Adventure Time wiki confirms the snail is a mollusk person, hidden in almost every episode of Adventure Time, usually seen waving at the screen. The cameos were initially a running gag and Easter egg, a challenge from Pendleton Ward to his animation team to add an extra layer of detail for attentive viewers. It was supposed to be the show's version of Where's Waldo. It worked like that for a while. Fans hunted the snail in every episode. It was fun. It was a game. The snail waved, and you felt good for finding it. In Mortal Folly, Season 2, Episode 23, the Lich uses the snail to free himself from the amber prison, where he'd been sealed by Billy. The Lich takes control of the snail's mind and makes it bash the prison open with its head. After being defeated in mortal recoil, the Lich returns to the snail's body, and from there, in Seasons 3 and 4, the snail continues appearing in every episode, but with possessed eyes, with a visibly malevolent expression. For anyone paying close enough attention, think about what happened here. The production had an established challenge. The snail is in every episode. The narrative had an established fact. The Lich was in the snail. The production could have modified the challenge. Maybe the snail would appear less, or only when narratively relevant, or with normal eyes to avoid confusing the Easter egg with the possession. They didn't do that. They left it exactly as it was. The the snail with possessed eyes, in every episode, for anyone paying sufficient attention. Because there was something right about keeping both states existing at the same time, the cute Easter egg and the Lich's possession in the same frame in every episode. That is the design philosophy of the whole show in a single character. The Lich, wearing the body of a waving snail, the death god, hidden inside the most innocent gesture imaginable, the possession hidden inside the game. These two things existing simultaneously without the show ever needing to call attention to the fact that this is what's happening. The Adventure Time wiki confirms that the possession was visible with specific eyes during seasons 3 and 4 before the Lich eventually switched to Billy's body after the Lich. After that, the snail returned to its normal waving. The game continued. The horror ended. Both versions of the snail existed sequentially in the same character across the show's run. There's a specific detail about how the possession manifests that I want you to have. The wiki describes the possessed snail's eyes as sunken and dark and filled with a green deadlight. Not just black eyes, specifically dead green, mortally green, which, in a series where the Lich is broadly associated with the colour green, his well of power, his aura, his destruction, is the right colour to mark his presence. The snail was waving with dead green eyes in every episode for seasons. And before we leave the snail, one last thing. The wiki notes that Finn, the Lich, the bear, Princess Bubblegum, the squirrel, and Shelby are the only characters who ever noticed or interacted with the snail in the TV series. Finn has interacted with the snail, and none of those characters who interacted with it, not even Finn, not even PB, seemed to notice it was possessed during the seasons it was. The Lich was in the snail. The snail interacted with heroes who were actively fighting the Lich. None of them noticed. You didn't notice either. None of us did. That's the show telling a story with details that exist primarily to be discovered retroactively, not to be seen and understood in the moment, to be found later, when you come back with the right information and transform what you already saw. Now let's go to the layer where things start to feel genuinely strange. Finn is colorblind. This was established in Red Starved, Season 5, Episode 38. Finn, Jake, and Marceline are trapped underground with no red food for Marceline to eat before she goes feral. Finn goes to find something red and comes back with what he insists is a ruby. Jake tells him it's an emerald. The show shifts to Finn's perspective. Everything green appears as grey. He's red-green colorblind. The Adventure Time wiki confirms Finn is, to at least some extent, red-green colorblind, as revealed in Red Starved. Here's the part that matters for this script. This isn't a fact the show reveals in Season 5. It's a Season 5 revelation that changes what you were seeing in Seasons 1 through 4. Think about Flame Princess, defined by her red and orange colour, by the fire visual that is her identity. How much of that specific visual identity was Finn actually perceiving? Think about the forests where so many episodes took place. The green world doesn't exist for Finn the way it does for everyone around him. Think about every time Finn described colours throughout the show and what that means now. The show never goes back and re-explains past scenes through this lens. It establishes the colour blindness in Season 5 and trusts you to do the retroactive work yourself. Trusts you to go back to earlier episodes watching Finn interact with a world he was perceiving differently than you ever realised. Jake is almost certainly dead by the time you see Obsidian. The 2020 HBO Max Distant Lands special takes place many years after the main series. Adult Finn is present, Jake is not. Adult Finn has a tattoo of Jake on his chest. Jake surrounded by flowers, memorial imagery. The Looper analysis of this detail notes, the chest tattoo, which shows Jake surrounded by flowers, certainly has all the hallmarks of a memorial. This was confirmed later in Together Again from 2021, where we learn Jake did die before the events of that special. But what matters for the Iceberg is this. Obsidian told you Jake was dead with a memorial tattoo on adult Finn's chest, in a special that was primarily about Marceline and PB, not with a dramatic scene, not with a revelation, with a background detail you'd see while following another story. If the main plot held your attention, and it should have, it's Marceline and PB. It's what everyone wanted. You didn't pause on adult Finn long enough to read the tattoo. The show told you Jake was dead. It told you in a tattoo, and then it continued without asking if you wanted to know. The Stag, No One Can Hear You, Season 3, Episode 15, aired November 14th, 2011. Written and storyboarded by Jesse Moynihan and Ako Castuera. Not widely discussed when people list the show's best or most disturbing episodes. And it should be. The Come Along With Me blog, covering every Adventure Time episode in depth notes that the title echoes the Alien tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream," and that the title card makes visual references to both Edvard Munch's The Scream and the poster for Hitchcock's Vertigo. That's what the show was saying before the episode even started. This is horror. This is isolation. This is the show preparing you for something different from what you usually get. And then the episode begins with Finn and Jake chasing a deer that's licking candy people, which seems innocuous. A deer in a fantasy series. There'll probably be a funny fight scene and the day will be saved. The deer breaks Finn's legs, twice, then throws him into a building. The screen goes dark. Finn wakes up. The hospital is empty. Nobody is there. Jake is in a trash pile with a head bandage. Jake believes everyone is hiding for his surprise birthday party. Jake says it's been 6 months. 6 months. The horror that follows is formally that of a psychological thriller. Finn has to determine, is Jake telling the truth about the time elapsed? If so, how did Finn survive 6 months in a coma? Who was taking care of him? Why is the Candy Kingdom empty? Was it actually the deer, or did Jake, brain damaged and delusional, trap the candy people himself? The show lets you believe the Jake theory for a significant portion of the episode's runtime. Jake, acting as his own puppeteer, staging a birthday party with puppet versions of their friends. Jake preventing Finn from going into the sewers. Jake's specific post-trauma delusion is detailed and internally consistent enough that the reveal, no, it really was a deer, Peppermint Butler tells them, lands with genuine surprise. And then the stag reveals its hands. It removes its front hooves. Underneath are human hands. It stands upright. It has fingers. It was wearing fake hooves over human hands the entire time. The reveal is brief, and the show doesn't dwell on it. The fight sequence that follows is quick, and the stag is defeated by cinder blocks to the head. But the image of the deer removing its hooves and revealing human hands is one of the most disturbing moments in Adventure Time, played without music or commentary. Simply shown. Andy Ristaino, the show's lead designer, considers the stag the show's creepiest character. This is confirmed in the Adventure Time wiki. TV tropes on the stag. Nothing is scarier. Nothing is known about the stag. Even the Lich has more explored about him than this thing. The Lich has a complete backstory. The stag has none. The stag is just a deer with human hands that broke a 12-year-old boy's legs and trapped a kingdom in sewers, and the show never explains why. It appears one more time, transformed into a telescope by Magic Man in Sons of Mars, and then never again. The show created one of its most genuinely disturbing characters, used it once, referenced it once more as a gag, and left it completely unexplained. This is the core technique of the Iceberg, not the mystery that was supposed to be solved, but the mystery that was never meant to be solved, placed in the background of a world that had much bigger mysteries to chase. Now let's go deeper. James Baxter, the horse, is a real human being, or rather, was inspired by a real human being, and that real human being did the voice and animation of the character. James Baxter, the character in Adventure Time, who is a horse that spreads joy by balancing on a beach ball while neighing his own name, is named after, voiced by, and was animated by the real animator James Baxter, who is one of the most celebrated animators in Hollywood history. The Wikipedia article on the episode confirms that Baxter was the supervising animator for Belle in Beauty and the Beast, Rafiki in The Lion King, and the title character in Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, among dozens of other credits. The origin of the character is documented in Wikipedia. Baxter was delivering a guest lecture at CalArts while Ward was a student. A student in the audience called out a request: animate a horse balancing on a beach ball. Baxter declined, saying he'd animate something simpler, but the image fixed itself in Ward's memory. Years later, when Adventure Time was in production, Baxter contacted Ward and offered to work on the show. Ward pitched him the character. Baxter said yes, and also provided his own voice for the horse. The episode aired May 6th, 2013, Season 5, Episode 19. The AV Club described the episode as a meta-commentary on the nature of Adventure Time itself, about finding your own way to make people happy, rather than copying someone else's. Here's what I want you to understand. The show about how to create joy in a post-apocalyptic world contains, within it, a tribute to the idea of making people happy through art, and that tribute is in the form of a horse that neighs its own name, animated by the real human being it represents. When James Baxter, the character, appears on screen and the show looks different, more fluid, more graceful, that's not imagination. That's literally the touch of a master animator in a show that normally uses a different style. You were seeing the difference between the show and the thing the show aspired to be, personified as a horse on a beach ball. Pendleton Ward stepped down as showrunner before Season 5 was complete. He told Rolling Stone, "I quit because it was driving me nuts." Ward is, by his own account, introverted, and the job of managing a room full of people, making hundreds of daily creative decisions, managing production, was incompatible with who he is. Adam Muto, the creative director, who had been working alongside Ward from the beginning, took over as showrunner and ran the show through to its conclusion in Season 10. The implication: the show most people think of as Pendleton Ward's Adventure Time, the complex, emotionally rich, philosophically dense show of Seasons 5 through 10, was primarily run not by Ward, but by Muto. Ward created the world. Muto shaped it into what it became. The post-apocalyptic setting emerged from a decision about frozen businessmen. The Simon and Marceline mythology, the Hall of Egress, the comet, I Remember You, that was primarily Muto running the show. The Cosmic Owl was designed with reference to a toilet. This is one of the most cited production details in Adventure Time community discussions, because it is so specifically strange. The Cosmic Owl, the majestic, all-seeing entity, whose presence in a dream marks it as prophetic, was designed with a toilet as a visual reference point, confirmed through various crew channels and the King of Vu production archive. There's a specific Adventure Time philosophy embedded in this. The show consistently took things that were supposed to be meaningful, cosmic entities, prophetic visions, ancient beings of enormous power, and grounded them in something mundane. The Cosmic Owl is based on a toilet. The Ice King, who once potentially ruled a frozen domain, worries about whether anyone likes him. Golb, the primordial chaos entity, gets absorbed into a human woman who loved a man too much to give up on him. The cosmic and the mundane are not separated in Adventure Time. They're the same thing at different scales. Now let's go to the territory that starts to feel genuinely unsettling. This is the layer where confirmed production details and canonical lore intersect with the things the show deliberately left unresolved. Puhoi has a specific and disturbing implication. Puhoi, Season 5, Episode 16, aired April 8th, 2013, is the episode where Finn enters Jake's pillow fort and falls through a portal to a world made entirely of pillows. He marries a pillow woman named Rosalinen. They have 2 children, Jay and Bonnie. Finn grows old in the pillow world. He loses the ability to access the portal home. He accepts that he will die there. He dies as an old man, surrounded by his family. His spirit, departing from the pillow world, bounces off a tongue. A massive, wet, physical tongue that seems to belong to something enormous. His spirit is flung back into his body in the pillow fort, and he wakes up as 12-year-old Finn, with no memory of the life he just lived. The tongue is Golb's tongue. This is confirmed by the show's cosmological architecture. The pillow world exists in Adventure Time's metaphysics as a real location, not a dream, not a simulation. And the mechanism by which Finn's memories of his life there are erased involves Golb's tongue in the passage between worlds. Puhoi aired in 2013, 2 years before Golb was mentioned by name, 4 years before Golb appeared on screen. You were watching a cute pillow episode about Finn living a whole life, and in the quiet transition moment when Finn's spirit left the pillow world, the most easily overlooked beat of the scene, Golb's tongue was there. The show placed its deepest cosmological entity in the transition between the pillow world and Finn's consciousness, years before it had a name for that entity, without acknowledgement or context. And here's the implication the show never directly addresses. The mechanism by which Finn's pillow world memories are erased involves Golb. That's not just magic happened, that's Golb actively involved in the erasure of the life Finn built there. Rosalind is still there, Jay and Bonnie are still there. They watched their father die as an old man, and then his body disappeared. They don't know where he went. They don't know that somewhere, in a treehouse in the land of Oo, a 12-year-old boy woke up with no memory of them. The show gives you this, and moves on in approximately 11 minutes. Here's what I Remember You was really doing, because it's the Iceberg episode on the emotional side, the same way Puhoi is the Iceberg episode on the existential side. The original title of I Remember You was Help. Rebecca Sugar, who co-wrote and co-storyboarded the episode with Cole Sanchez, embedded personal material in it. The episode aired October 15th, 2012. It has a 9.7 on IMDb, 2.535 million viewers when it originally aired. The Ice King arrives at Marceline's house wanting to make music together. He says he found some old notes he wrote that seem important. The notes are pages torn from Simon Petrikov's journal, pages describing his love for Marceline, his awareness of what the crown was doing to him, his determination to keep wearing it anyway, because it was the only way to protect her. The Ice King doesn't know what the notes say. He can't read them. The crown destroyed his ability to make meaning from his own memories. He holds up pages from the journal of Simon Petrikov and sees only potential song lyrics, not the record of a man slowly losing his mind while desperately trying to keep a little girl safe. Marceline reads them. She knows. She has always known. She spent 1,000 years knowing, while the man who wrote them lost the ability to know anything about his own past. And they make music together, and the Ice King is happy and doesn't understand why Marceline is crying, and the episode ends. The original title was Help. That's what the episode is, a help call from a man who is no longer able to call for help, arriving through his own writing to a girl who is still listening 1,000 years later. You went to the episode watching two characters make music. You were supposed to be hearing Simon asking for help, the exquisite corpse writing process. Screen Rant's Adventure Time trivia article documents this. One of the fun things that the show's writers would do was a game called Exquisite Corpse. One writer would write out a segment of a story, the next writer would follow it up, and so on. Exquisite Corpse is a surrealist game originally played by artists and poets. Each participant adds to a piece without seeing what came before, creating something that accumulates strangeness through disconnected collaboration. The show that feels like it has a hidden, unified design was partly created through a process that is specifically about not having a unified design. Some of what feels like deep lore was accumulated accidentally through writers building on each other's foundations without full visibility into the plan. The show that looks like it has a plan was partly improvised. The plan emerged from the improvisation. This doesn't make the show worse. It makes the architecture more interesting. And it changes what the iceberg means. Parts of it were placed deliberately by creators, parts accumulated, and parts of what looks deliberate is accumulation that aligns so well it looks like planning. The pilot was on Nickelodeon. Adventure Time began as a short film that aired as part of Nickelodeon's Random Cartoons showcase in 2008. The Finn character was named Penn, after Ward himself, whose real name is Pendleton. The character was a self-insert fantasy from Ward's own imagination, with his own name. Nickelodeon passed twice. Cartoon Network picked it up, and it premiered April 5th, 2010. What changed between the pilot and the show? Finn's name, the slight distance from the autobiographical, pen to Finn, creator to character, open space for the show to go places a pure self-insert couldn't. The voice actor also changed. Zach Shader voiced Penn in the pilot. Jeremy Shader, Zach's younger brother, auditioned for the Cartoon Network series. The Adventure Time wiki notes, according to Jeremy Shader, the showrunners did not at first realize that he was Zach's younger brother. They cast the younger brother without knowing it. And then Jeremy Shader's voice started changing, as boys' voices do. Ward decided Finn would not be recast. Instead, Finn would age with Jeremy Shader. When Finn sounds more mature in Season 6 than in Season 1, it's because Jeremy Shader is more mature. The fiction and the reality are synced. That's why Adventure Time's treatment of growing up feels authentic in ways most animated shows don't. The character literally grew up during production. Rebecca Sugar's departure. Sugar joined the show early and became a central creative voice in its most emotionally resonant work. What was missing? I Remember You. Simon and Marcy. Wikipedia on Simon and Marcy confirms she left after that episode to create Steven Universe. If you watch Simon and Marcy, knowing it's her last episode on the show, there's something different about how it lands. It feels like a farewell. It's the episode that most completely synthesizes what Sugar had been building. The tragedy of Simon, the love between Simon and Marceline, the specific horror of watching someone you love disappear into something they didn't choose. Steven Universe carries these themes forward in its own form. The corrupted gems who lost themselves to something beyond their control. The ancient beings who appear as something they're not. The small person trying to reach someone who can't fully hear them. And Adventure Time continued without her. Muto's team built the mythology differently. More cosmological, more explicitly philosophical, but the specific emotional register of the Simon-Marceline thread, the private grief between two people across 1,000 years, that was Sugar's. I Remember You exists because Rebecca Sugar built it. The fact that it has a 9.7 on IMDb is the audience recognizing, even without knowing the production history, that something essential and irreplaceable was embedded in that episode. You moved on to the next episode after watching it. Someone left the show after making it. Now let's go to the deep water. Peppermint Butler is genuinely ancient and genuinely terrifying. Peppermint Butler, PB's small, formal, seemingly ordinary butler, is one of the show's most consistently disturbing characters if you pay attention across its full run. Early in the show, seasons 1 and 2, Peppermint Butler is the formal and slightly strange butler of Princess Bubblegum. He does his job. He's impeccably courteous. He has an accent. And then there are these moments. In Death in Bloom, Season 2, Finn and Jake go to the land of the dead to retrieve PB's plant. When they return, Peppermint Butler asks something specific from Finn. Finn's skin, later, for a job he has in mind. Finn laughs. The show continues. It was a gag, but a gag about what? What is Peppermint Butler if he's negotiating to have a living hero's skin for future work? In The Suitor, Season 5, when a wizard arrives to court PB and fails, Peppermint Butler makes threats that are genuinely menacing. Not formal servant defending the princess's interests. Threatening. The kind of threatening where you realize this character has access to things he shouldn't. In You Made Me, Season 4, Peppermint Butler is shown performing rituals. Actual, working dark magic rituals. In The Vault, Season 5, Peppermint Butler appears as a toddler in the memories of Shoko, Finn's past life, from a period that predates the show's main narrative by what appears to be hundreds of years. PB is already ruling the Candy Kingdom. Peppermint Butler is already there, as a toddler. The Wizard City Distant Lands special finally confirms what the details had been suggesting. Peppermint Butler had a complete parallel identity as a powerful dark wizard, a feared practitioner. The Golb event at the finale destroyed his accumulated power, leaving him starting over at Wizard School. But Wizard City doesn't answer the central question. What is Peppermint Butler? How does a candy person created by PB become a powerful dark wizard? What was he doing during centuries of service to PB's court that PB didn't fully know about? The show gave you all of these details across 10 seasons. Each of them was there while the screen showed Peppermint Butler serving tea and being impeccably formal, and most people who watched each of those episodes registered Peppermint Butler as the adorable strange butler without connecting what was in plain sight. That's the iceberg, not hidden information. Information that was visible that you didn't connect, because the context for connecting it only came later. Now let's go to the absolute bottom. Gunter is Orgelorg, the breaker of worlds. Everyone knows Gunter as the Ice King's penguin, the cute supporting character who appears consistently in the Ice King's fortress, occasionally slightly more aware than a penguin should be. Gunter is a primordial being of enormous cosmic power who once attempted to absorb a catalyst comet. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, had Grob Gob Glob Grod incapacitate him before he succeeded. The incapacitation didn't kill Orgelorg, it compressed him. The Earth's gravity pressed his enormous cosmic form into a penguin. Orgelorg, the breaker of worlds, became Gunter, the penguin. The Ice King never adopted Gunter. Orgelorg was drawn to the crown's power, embedded himself in the Ice King's household, and waited for millennia in penguin form. And across the entire series, while you were watching the Ice King use Gunter as a pet and comic sidekick, you were watching a cosmic monster imprisoned in a penguin, pretending, again, the familiar thing with the wrong thing inside it, the snail, Peppermint Butler, Billy with the lich inside, the stag with human hands under its hooves. The show returned to this same well repeatedly because it's the right theme, things that seem safe, with the wrong thing inside. But here is what the iceberg finds at its deepest layer with Gunter, the finale. When Gunter finds the reset crown, which now grants its wearer's truest, deepest wish, Gunter's deepest wish is not to be Orgelorg, not to be the breaker of worlds. The being that destroyed cosmic civilizations and terrified Abraham Lincoln has as its deepest wish to be the Ice King, the ridiculous, pathetic Ice King who loses every fight against a 12-year-old boy, the ice wizard nobody likes. The character who started as the repetitive villain of Season 1, Orgelorg wanted that, wanted to continue being that, because centuries of life with Simon, centuries of being the Ice King's penguin, centuries of domestic existence inside a compressed form, produced a being who preferred the life it had built to the life it used to have. And if that sounds like love, if that sounds like what happens when something that was once terrible becomes something beloved, the show did its job. You were watching a pet. You were watching a cosmic being choosing the small life it had built inside a form that wasn't its own. The treehouse grew from Shoko's bones. The Vault, Season 5, Episode 34, is the episode where BMO helps Finn access his repressed memories, and he discovers his past life as Shoko, a one-armed thief hired to steal the amulet from Princess Bubblegum. Shoko died near the treehouse site, her body decomposed into the land. The treehouse grew from the location of her remains. The warm, safe, beloved treehouse where Finn and Jake live, the home base of the entire series, is rooted in the bones of Finn's past life. The ghost of Shoko appeared earlier, in the creeps, as a mysterious one-armed figure that Finn sees and immediately suppresses. That one's going in the vault, and it's gone. The show showed you Finn's past life as a mysterious background ghost in Season 3, 2 seasons before the vault told you who she was. If you go back to the creeps, knowing about the vault, the ghost Finn sees and immediately represses is the ghost of the person whose bones hold up the floor he walks on. You saw the ghost in 2011. You didn't know it was Shoko until 2013. The show was telling you about Shoko before it told you Shoko's name. The Pillow World family. A final accounting. Finn spent what appeared to be a full human lifetime in the Pillow World. He married Rosalinnen, who the episode treats with full dignity, a person with history and personality and genuine love for Finn. Their children, Jay and Bonnie, grew up in the Pillow World. Finn grew old there. He accepted he would die there. He died. His spirit bounced off Golb's tongue and returned to his 12-year-old body in Jake's pillow fort. He woke up with no memory. He continued the adventure. The Pillow family is still there. They watched Finn die as an old man. Then his body disappeared. Either way, he's gone, and they're there. The Adventure Time wiki confirms. The Pillow World is a real location in the show's cosmology, not a dream, not a simulation, a real place that Finn could access through Jake's pillow fort. It has its own geography and its own people and its own history. Rosalinnen is there. Jay and Bonnie are there. Finn's grave might be there. The life he lived and forgot is there. The show never goes back. The Pillow World never appears again after Puhoi. Rosalinnen and Jay and Bonnie are left in a world the series visited once and never returned to, with a grief that was never acknowledged by the narrative. This is the emotional bottom of the iceberg, not the cosmic horror of Golb or the terror of the stag, the specific, quiet, unbearable grief of a family that was left behind in a world made of pillows by a boy who forgot them. Let me close with one thing about what the iceberg means for how you watch the show. The iceberg format has a specific risk. It can make the surface seem less valuable than the depth, as if knowing the deeper lore makes the show more legitimate, more worthy of serious attention. I want to push back on that. The surface of Adventure Time is real. Slumber Party Panic, the premiere episode, is genuinely funny and genuinely warm and does not require any knowledge of Golb or the Dead World system to be worth watching. Finn and Jake running through the title sequence are genuinely joyful, regardless of whether you've read every wiki page. BMO's specific brand of earnest affection for the people around it, regardless of what BMO turns out to be cosmologically, is real and touching in every episode. The iceberg deepens the surface. It doesn't replace it. The tragedy of Simon is more powerful if you know the full backstory of the Crown's origin in Evergreen and Gunter. But it is also powerful if you just watch I Remember You and sit with the specific image of the Ice King singing Simon's words without understanding them. You don't need the iceberg to be moved by that. The stag is terrifying, even if you don't know about the snail's lich possession or the pre-universe monsters category. It's just a deer with human hands that broke a boy's legs. That's enough. The Pillow World family is heartbreaking, even if you don't know about Golb's tongue or the Dead World system. Finn lived a whole life and forgot it. That's enough. The iceberg is for people who want more. The show is complete without it. The snail was waving at you in every episode while the lich possessed it. Finn was colorblind the whole time. Jake was probably dead by the time you saw Obsidian, with a memorial tattoo on adult Finn's chest. James Baxter, the horse, was animated by the real person he represents. Pendleton Ward stepped back from running the show he created halfway through its run. The post-apocalyptic setting emerged from a decision about frozen businessmen. The Pillow World family is still there, and somewhere below all of that, in the deepest and darkest part of the iceberg, Golb's tongue is touching Finn's departing spirit in Puhoi, connecting a silly pillow episode to the show's deepest cosmic horror, without explanation, without context, without acknowledgement. You've been seeing all of this. Now you know what you were seeing. Subscribe if you haven't. Come back whenever you want to go deeper. There is always more below the waterline. Good night. Let me slow down at each layer and give them the full weight they deserve, because I moved too fast through some of them. Let's go back to the snail with the detail it's owed. Pendleton Ward proposed the challenge to the animation team. The Fun Facts documentation confirms it was specifically Ward's challenge, adding an extra layer of detail for attentive viewers. The team committed to it. In early episodes where the snail was inadvertently omitted, the production retroactively inserted it for reruns and home video releases. The snail would be in every episode. That commitment was active and tracked, and then something happened that probably wasn't planned when the challenge was proposed. The lich possessed the snail in Mortal Folly, and after the lich's defeat in Mortal Recoil, the lich returned to the snail's body. The appearances in subsequent seasons continued, but now the snail had possessed eyes, a malevolent expression for anyone looking closely enough. The production had an established challenge. The snail is in every episode. The narrative had an established fact. The lich was in the snail. The production could have separated these. They didn't. They let both states exist in the same frame, in every episode, with the weight of both simultaneously. This is the show's signature move applied to its most important villain, the lich, using the body of a waving snail, the death god, hidden inside the most innocent gesture imaginable. Both things true at once, without the show ever needing to announce that this is what's happening. Now let's go to the I Remember You production history with the depth it deserves. When I Remember You aired on October 15th, 2012, the show had already established Simon Petrikov's backstory in Holly Jolly Secrets during Season 3. Viewers knew the Ice King had once been Simon. What they didn't have was what this episode gave them, the specific written record of Simon losing himself, knowing he was losing himself, continuing anyway. The working title was Help. Rebecca Sugar embedded personal material in the episode. She has discussed this in various contexts, without detailing exactly what, maintaining the distinction between the work and the autobiography, while acknowledging the boundary, was porous. Here's what Help was doing structurally that most viewers didn't see while watching it. The Ice King arrives with pages from Simon's journal because he thinks they might be song lyrics. For him, they are content without meaning, words that could potentially be arranged into something. He presents them to Marceline as material. Marceline reads them, and they're not content without meaning. They're the record of a specific person at a specific moment, choosing to sacrifice himself for a specific reason. Simon knew the crown was taking him. He wrote about this. He kept wearing the crown anyway because wearing it was the only way to keep Marceline safe in a post-apocalyptic world that had no other protection to offer. When they make music together, and the Ice King sings Simon's words without understanding them, you're hearing Simon Petrikov speak through the mechanism that destroyed him. The crown turned Simon into the Ice King, and the Ice King is singing the words Simon wrote about what the crown was doing to Simon. That's a loop of loss that the episode doesn't explain. It doesn't stop on it and say, here's what's happening. It just shows it, leaves it to exist, trusts it will land, and then the Ice King is happy. He says that was fun. He doesn't understand why Marceline is sad. He leaves. You went to that episode watching two characters make music. The original title was Help. What you were actually watching was a man asking for help through the only thing that remained. His writing, delivered by accident, by a being who doesn't know he's Simon, to a person who is still listening, even when there's no one left to hear. Now the stag with the full horror it earned. The Come Along With Me blog's analysis of No One Can Hear You notes that the title echoes Alien's tagline, and that the title card references both The Scream and Hitchcock's Vertigo. The show was telling you before the episode even began. This is horror. This is isolation. Prepare accordingly. The episode opens in medias res. Finn and Jake already chasing the deer, which seems low stakes. A deer in a fantasy series is not usually a serious threat. There will probably be a funny fight, and the problem will be resolved. The deer breaks Finn's legs. Twice. Then throws him into a building. The screen goes dark. What follows is formally structured as a psychological thriller. Finn must determine, is Jake telling the truth about 6 months? If so, how did Finn survive 6 months in a coma without hospital staff? Who cared for him? Why is everyone gone? Was it the deer, or did Jake, brain damaged and delusional, trap the candy people himself? The show gives you enough reason to believe the Jake theory to sustain genuine uncertainty. Jake's specific delusion is internally consistent. His conviction that everyone is hiding for his birthday party is presented with enough coherence that you can follow the logic, even as you recognize it's wrong. Finn follows it too, for a while. The moment it breaks, I've been waiting 6 months. The show gives you a slow close-up on Finn's face as the 6 months echo, one of the most quietly effective horror beats in the series. And then the stag reveals its hands, removes the front hooves, human hands underneath, stands upright, has fingers. Was wearing fake hooves over human hands the entire time. Lead designer Andy Restaino considers the stag the show's creepiest character. The Adventure Time wiki confirms this attribution, and he's right. But the reason he's right is precise. The lich is frightening because of power and scale. The stag is frightening because of wrongness. A thing that seemed to be a thing was another thing. The familiar shape with the wrong thing inside. That pattern, familiar exterior, wrong interior, is the show returning to its central technique across different characters. The snail waving with lich possession inside. Billy's body with the lich inside. Peppermint Butler's formality with centuries of dark magic inside. The stag's deer body with human hands inside. The show built a world where you can't always trust that things are what they look like, and then buried that theme deep enough that it felt like individual incidents rather than a pattern. The stag appears one more time, transformed into a telescope by Magic Man in Sons of Mars. Never explained, never given a backstory. The most frightening villain in a season of Adventure Time has less lore than almost any background character. That's intentional. An explained stag would be weaker than an unexplained one. The show understood this and left it deliberately unresolved. Now let me address the Puhoi structure more carefully, because the episode is doing something that rewards being walked through slowly. When Finn enters Jake's pillow fort at the beginning of Puhoi, he's frustrated. He and Jake just had an argument. The specific reason, Finn isn't sure if Flame Princess likes him. He's caught in his own feelings, in his own uncertainty about a relationship he wants, and doesn't know if he has. So he enters the pillow fort to escape for a moment, finds the portal, lives a complete life, gets married, has children, ages, dies, returns with no memory, And the very next moment in the show, literally the next moment after Finn wakes up with no memory, is about whether Flame Princess likes him. The show picks up exactly where it left off. The concern Finn had before entering the Pillow Fort. What the show is doing, demonstrating that Finn's core, his concerns, his relationships, his way of being in the world, persists even after a complete life lived and forgotten. He wakes up as exactly the same Finn. The decades of the Pillow World didn't change him in any way that persisted to consciousness. That can be read as comforting or disturbing depending on how you think about it. Comforting, identity is persistent, can't be erased by alternative lives. Disturbing, a complete life, love, family, growth, death, left no residue. Everything Finn was in the Pillow World vanished without trace. The show presents this without telling you how to feel. It just shows Finn waking up worried about Flame Princess, as if nothing happened. You were watching narrative continuity. You were watching an argument about the nature of identity and memory, and what persists of us when a life ends. Both were true at the same time. And the family he left behind, they're in the Pillow World, in a world accessible through a treehouse that gets destroyed in the series finale by one of Golb's monsters. With the treehouse destroyed and the Pillow Fort presumably with it, access to the Pillow World, already theoretically available, became even more uncertain. The cycle continues. The treehouse that grew from Shoko's bones was destroyed. The pair of adventurers who lived there died and reincarnated as Shermie and Beth. The world they protected continues, but somewhere, in the Pillow World, accessible through a treehouse that no longer exists, Rosalind is there, Jay and Bonnie are there. The family Finn built and forgot, and the show never resolved, is in a world that may now be more isolated than it was. The iceberg goes this far and stops. There is no more depth available. There's only what the show placed and didn't resolve, waiting in the dark where the snail waved with possessed eyes, and where Golb's tongue touched Finn's spirit, and where the Pillow World family continues to exist without anyone coming. That is the bottom of the Adventure Time iceberg, not darker than what's above it, quieter. The show did the work for the fans who would find this. It did the work anyway. It placed Golb's tongue in Puhoi before Golb had a name. It placed Jake's memorial tattoo on adult Finn's chest in a special about other characters. It kept the snail possessed through seasons of background details most people weren't checking. It did this because the show it built had this kind of attention embedded in it, and because they believed, correctly, that there would be fans who would pay attention carefully enough to reach the bottom and find something genuine there. You found it. Good night. Let me now trace the full Simon thread the way the iceberg requires, layer by layer, each revelation changing what came before. Surface. The Ice King was once Simon Petrikov. He put on a crown, and it destroyed his mind over decades while giving him magical power and immortality. By the time we meet him as the Ice King, Simon is almost completely gone. First layer below. The crown's origin. Evergreen. Season 6, Episode 26, reveals that the crown was created by the ice elemental Evergreen during the Cretaceous period. Its function? To grant its wearer's deepest wish, to stop a catalyst comet. Evergreen was incapacitated before he could use it. His apprentice Gunter wore it instead. Gunter's deepest wish was to be like his master. The crown interpreted this and began transforming Gunter into what he saw Evergreen as, a cruel ice wizard. The crown's curse since that day. It transforms its wearer into an Ice King archetype, based on the crown's interpretation of the first user's deepest wish, not based on who the wearer is, based on what Gunter wanted to be. Distorted, applied to every person who ever wears it afterward. Simon put on the crown and began transforming into this archetype, not because the crown was designed to destroy him, because the crown was designed to grant wishes, and was warped by the first wish into something that perverts wishes rather than grants them. This is why in the finale, when Gunter, the penguin, finds the reset crown, his deepest wish is to be the Ice King, not Orgalorg, the breaker of worlds. The Ice King, the ridiculous character from Season 1, a cosmic being who compressed into a penguin and spent centuries in domestic existence with Simon, became, through that time, a being whose truest wish was to continue being what it had become. And what does that mean for Simon? Simon was being destroyed by a curse that traces back to the Cretaceous. He wore the crown to protect Marceline. The crown applied Gunther's distortion to him. Nothing that happened to Simon was Simon making wrong choices. He found an artifact that had been broken 66 million years before he was born, and he still wrote about it, still asked for help in the only way available to him, still left his journal pages where Marceline might eventually find them. Second layer below, the crown appears through the whole series in ways most viewers don't connect to Simon's backstory. Magic Man, the wizard who makes others' lives miserable through unpredictable magic, is eventually revealed to have also suffered loss, connected to GOLB. He shares an emotional architecture with Simon, even before the connection is explained. When Patience St. Pim, the ice elemental who surfaces in the final seasons, is introduced, she also has a relationship with ice power that echoes Simon's. Ice in Adventure Time isn't just an element, it's a form of loss, of preservation, of trying to keep something exactly as it was in a world that keeps changing. Simon's crown literally froze his memories and identity like amber, and the visual language of ice throughout the show carries that. In every episode with the Ice King, in every moment where cold is emphasized, the show is talking about what happens when someone tries to stop time to hold on to something they love. You were watching the Ice King throw ice lightning. You were watching someone trying to hold on to what was gone. Let me now address the catalyst comets in the full depth the Iceberg requires, because they're the lore item with the most implications and the most distributed presentation. The basic premise: once every 1,000 years, a catalyst comet strikes the Earth, bringing an agent of change. The show reveals this in Evergreen, when we learn about the Cretaceous period and the first comet. And then in The Comet, the Season 6 finale, when the purple comet arrives and offers Finn transcendence. What most people know, Finn declined the offer of transcendence because he wanted to continue his meat existence. Martin accepted the offer instead. What most people don't track, the show established that Finn is a reincarnation of the Blue Comet. In the Vault, when Finn accesses his memories of Shoko, there are flashes of other lives, including a life as a Blue Comet. The Blue Comet was one of the incarnations of the Catalyst Comet. This means that when the Purple Comet offers Finn a new form of existence, it's partly offering him a return to what Finn was before he was human. The comet is speaking to something that was once itself a comet. Finn's line, "I've put a lot of effort into my meat existence and I'd like to see it through," isn't just a choice to stay in ooh rather than transcend. It's a choice to continue being human, rather than return to what he was cosmologically, before choosing to incarnate as human. You were watching Finn decline cosmic power. You were watching a cosmic entity choosing to remain human for another turn, the first being when it incarnated as the Blue Comet that eventually led to Finn. The parallel with Martin is what changes the weight of the scene. Martin, who spent his whole life avoiding commitment, leaving before things got difficult, never staying anywhere long enough to be accountable, accepts the comet's offer immediately. Of course he does. The comet's offer is exactly what Martin always wanted, the ability to go somewhere else when things get complicated. In its most extreme form, Finn says no, Martin says yes. The contrast isn't about courage, it's about who valued the connections they have enough to keep them. You were watching the Season 6 finale as Finn declining power. You were watching two characters simultaneously revealing their core values, with the comet as the clearest character test the show ever constructed. Now Princess Bubblegum with the honesty the Iceberg requires. PB on the surface is the scientist princess who rules the Candy Kingdom, and is the voice of reason when Finn and Jake go too far. That's true. And there's another layer. PB created the Candy People. Everyone knows this. What most people don't track are the ethical implications the show has been accumulating about what that means. In The Suitor, Season 5, PB demonstrates she can biologically influence the Candy People, not puppet control, more like biological influence, enough to suggest that the creator-creation relationship still exists functionally, not just historically. In Goliad, Season 4, PB creates a living heir, a sugar sphinx named Goliad, to rule the Candy Kingdom if she dies. Goliad develops in dangerous directions, becomes authoritarian and manipulative. PB has to create another conscious being, Stormo, as a counterweight. The two beings PB created are now locked in eternal conflict, because she needed a counterbalance to her first creation's failure. What PB did, created a conscious entity, saw it develop in ways she considered morally problematic, then created another conscious entity specifically to neutralize it. Two beings are now permanently trapped in conflict because she needed a check on her first mistake. In The Cooler, Season 7, PB is revealed to have built a weapon capable of neutralizing the Fire Kingdom, a state weapon built in secret, maintained as a last resort option. In Nemesis, Season 6, when tracking a threat, PB uses a surveillance system she has in the Candy Kingdom to monitor movements. Each of these details, biological influence, Goliad and Stormo, the secret weapon, the surveillance, was presented in separate episodes as character complications for PB. But if you put them all together, you build a portrait of a ruler who created her citizens, can biologically influence them, has secret state weapons against neighboring states, and monitors her own citizens when she deems it necessary. That doesn't make PB a villain. The show never treats her as one, but the show was accumulating these details across seasons in separate episodes, trusting that no one would necessarily connect them all at once. And if you do connect them, the PB you get is more complicated than the scientist princess of the surface. The show never asked you to make that connection. It just made the details available. Now, the Dead World system, the part of the iceberg closest to genuinely unmapped. The show established the existence of multiple dead worlds through various episodes before unifying them into a system. In Sons of Mars, Season 4, Episode 14, Jake is accidentally sent to the afterlife when Grob Gob Glob Grod mistakes him for Magic Man. He ends up in the 37th Dead World. Abraham Lincoln of Mars rescues him by sending his own soul as a substitute. The 37th Dead World was established in 2012. In 2021, Together Again reveals that the 37th Dead World is where Finn initially ends up after his death. The show linked a background detail from 2012, the specific number of Jake's Dead World, to Finn's afterlife experience almost a decade later. That level of narrative consistency is something the exquisite corpse writing process shouldn't be able to produce, and yet it did. The number 37 was chosen in 2012 and was honoured in 2021. This suggests either more long-term planning than the exquisite corpse description implies for specific details, or there was someone in production maintaining a record of Dead World numbers. Both possibilities are interesting. The first suggests that the Sons of Mars lore was planted deliberately as setup for a payoff that would only come years later. The second suggests there was a continuity tracker for details as specific as the number of a dead world from a single episode character visit. The system has at least 37 realms. The show doesn't tell you how many total, doesn't tell you who built them, how they were organized, why there's an entity called life assigning souls to them, what determines where a soul goes, whether the system has a function beyond containing the dead, or whether it was created or simply exists. Together Again adds Mr. Fox, a being who handles past life quotients and reincarnation logistics. That tells you there's bureaucracy in the afterlife, that there are processes, that the system has administration, but not who established it or why. The show built an afterlife specific enough to feel like it has rules, but not explained enough to understand the rules. That's not negligence. That's the iceberg technique applied to cosmology. Give enough to know there's more, not enough to find the bottom. There is always more below the waterline. That's true of the iceberg, and true of OO. Subscribe before we go to the final layer. It genuinely helps keep this channel going. And now, the very bottom. What is Golb? The show gives you Golb in pieces across years. The tongue in Puhoi in 2013, before it had a name. References to the last scholar of Golb when the Lich describes his origin. The physical appearance in Come Along With Me as the threat that triggers the finale. Betty's merger with Golb, creating Golbetty. And in the Fiona and Cake specials of 2023, the Lich as a tiny cube orbiting Golbetty. What the show never tells you, what GOLB is in its fundamental nature. The cosmology says GOLB is the incarnation of chaos and entropy, that it exists beyond the universe, or at the universe's boundary, or embodies principles of the universe. That the Lich was its scholar, implying Golby has something that can be studied, that it has knowledge or perspective that can be transmitted, that Betty was absorbed into it and created Golbetty, implying Golby can incorporate human personality. But what Golb wants, if it wants anything, was never established. Whether it has goals or acts purely as force rather than agent, not established. Whether the merger with Betty fundamentally changed Golb or was simply absorption, not established. The show gave you enough to know Golb exists and is cosmologically significant. It didn't give you enough to understand what Golb actually is. That's deliberate. Golb functions in Adventure Time's cosmology as something sufficiently beyond human comprehension that attempts to explain it would create the illusion of understanding without the substance. The Lich explains enough to be terrifying. Golb doesn't need to explain anything to be what it is. The inexplicability isn't a failure in the narrative. It's the correct characterization of an entity operating at this level. And here's the last thing about the iceberg. Golb's tongue was in Puhoi in 2013, 2 years before Golb was mentioned by name, 4 years before Golb appeared on screen. The tongue of Golb was in the transition mechanism between the pillow world and Finn's consciousness, part of the architecture of how worlds work in Adventure Time, years before the show told you what that tongue belonged to. When Golb finally appeared in the finale, it didn't arrive from outside, it was already inside. The tongue in Puhoi was the evidence. You were watching Puhoi as a pillow episode. You were watching the show's cosmological architecture, placing its deepest element somewhere you'd see it, but not understand what you were seeing. Until now, the snail was waving at you. The Lich was inside the snail. The Pillow World family is still there. Jake was dead when you saw Obsidian. The memorial tattoo on adult Finn's chest told you. James Baxter, the horse, was animated by the real person he represents. Pendleton Ward stepped back from the show he created halfway through its run. The treehouse grew from Shoko's bones. Golb's tongue was in Puhoi, 4 years before Golb had a name. You've been seeing all of this. Now you know what you were seeing. Good night. Let me now go through the iceberg items I haven't fully developed, because each one deserves more than a mention. The treehouse needs the full treatment, because the treehouse is home. It's the safe place. It's where Finn and Jake live across 10 seasons, and it grew from a very specific location. The Vault, Season 5, Episode 34, is the episode where BMO helps Finn access his repressed memories, and he discovers his past life as Shoko, a one-armed thief hired to steal the amulet from Princess Bubblegum. Shoko died near the treehouse site. Her body decomposed into the land. The treehouse grew from the location of her remains. The warm, beloved treehouse where Finn and Jake live, the home base of the entire series, is rooted in the bones of Finn's past life. This is rarely mentioned when people list the show's disturbing revelations, but it's one of the strangest and most complete ones. Finn lives, in every episode, in a home that grew from his earlier self. He doesn't know this for most of the show. When he learns in The Vault, the episode treats it as something Finn needs to process, to make peace with what Shoko did and what happened to her. And then the series continues. Finn keeps living in the treehouse. There's also Shoko's ghost. In The Creeps, Season 3, Episode 12, Finn sees a ghost of a one-armed figure during the episode. He doesn't know who she is. The show doesn't tell him. Finn decides immediately to repress the vision. That one's going in the vault, and it's gone, and the episode continues. That's the first appearance of Shoko. Before we know her, the show showed you Finn's past life as a mysterious ghost in Season 3, and then revealed who she was in Season 5. If you go back to The Creeps, knowing about the vault, the ghost Finn sees, and immediately represses, is the ghost of the person whose bones sustain the floor he walks on. You saw the ghost in 2011. You didn't know it was Shoko until 2013. The show was telling you about Shoko before it told you Shoko's name. There's also the arm. Shoko had one arm. The show establishes this in her appearance in The Vault. Finn loses his right arm in Escape from the Citadel, Season 6. The soul that reincarnates as Finn keeps losing the arm of reaching, the instrument that extends toward others, that tries to hold on to what's leaving, that reaches past the point of safety. The show established this trans-incarnation pattern in enough detail to be verifiable. Shoko with one arm, Finn losing an arm. The soul carries the arm wound across lives. This pattern is there to be seen. It requires tracking across seasons and incarnations, and the show never asks you to do it. It just lets the pattern exist for whoever looks closely enough. Now Marceline, because the iceberg of Marceline is deeper than most people trace. Marceline has 1,000 years of history. That's the surface. The iceberg. The show distributed those 1,000 years in a very specific way. And if you organize them chronologically, rather than by air date, what you get is a portrait of someone who spent most of her life without anyone who understood her completely. The Mushroom War destroyed the world when Marceline was a child. She survived as a half-demon. Simon found her in the ruins and took care of her until the crown took him completely. Simon disappeared as Simon and the Ice King appeared in his place, physically the same, emotionally different, with no memory of who she was to him. Marceline was alone. She spent the next period growing up in a world rebuilding itself. At some point, she became a vampire. Stakes reveals she was hunting vampires to protect the surviving humans and absorbed vampirism in the process. At some point, she found Princess Bubblegum in the early formation of the Candy Kingdom. Their relationship was significant enough to leave marks on both of them, and complicated enough to have ended in ways that hurt them both before the show begins. When the show starts, Marceline is 1,000 years old and living in a cave the Ice King keeps coveting. She's making music. She's introduced as an antagonist in her first appearance, someone who wants Finn and Jake's treehouse. The arc across the show is from comic antagonist to complex character to the person who finally gets back what she lost. PB returned to her. Simon returned to himself. Briefly, in the finale, before Betty merged with GOLB, and Hambo, her stuffed animal that Simon left her when the crown finally took him, returned in an episode that will break your heart if you understand what it meant. Simon and Marcy, the last episode Rebecca Sugar storyboarded for Adventure Time, shows you what Hambo meant, shows you Simon and a young Marceline in the ruins, with little food. Simon wearing the crown to fight off monsters, even knowing what it was doing to him, singing her silly songs to keep her comfortable. When Marceline eventually gets Hambo back, she's not just getting a toy, she's getting the last physical object from the only person who treated her as family before the show began. You were watching Marceline get a stuffed animal back. You were watching 1,000 years of loss having something returned. And then, in the finale, Simon is himself again. Briefly, Betty merged with Golb to protect him. Simon is free of the crown. He is Simon again. How long that lasts is ambiguous. The show doesn't resolve it cleanly, but Marceline was there when Simon was Simon again. Whatever the ending meant, the end of a wait that began approximately 1,000 years ago. The show did this in the background of a finale busy with Golby monsters and the future of Ooh. It didn't give Marceline and Simon a dramatic reunion moment. It just let it happen, quietly, among all the other things that were happening. You were watching the end of a series. You might have been watching the end of a 1,000-year wait. The show trusted you to know what you were seeing. Now let me address something I haven't mentioned yet. The King of Ooh Tumblr, and what it represents as a type of iceberg. The kingofoo.tumblr.com is the official behind-the-scenes Tumblr for the Adventure Time crew, run by various production team members. The Adventure Time wiki on the King of Ooh confirms. The King of Ooh is also the namesake/mascot of the Tumblr blog for the Adventure Time crew, kingofoo.tumblr.com. This blog is an extraordinary archive of production art, character designs, storyboard pages, production notes, alternate designs, and behind-the-scenes photographs that crew members posted during the show's run. It is simultaneously a gift to fans and a window into the creative process that most shows simply don't provide. The crew zine posted on the blog included contributions from Rebecca Sugar, Steve Wolfhard, Tom Herpich, Hannah K. Nystrom, Patrick McHale, Kent Osborne, Jesse Moynihan, C.O. Kim, and Pendleton Ward himself, among many others. The full creative team, making work outside the official show, sharing it through an official channel, giving fans access to the people behind the episodes. Most fans of the show have never visited kingofoo.tumblr.com. It still exists. There are two types of iceberg in Adventure Time. The one the production team chose to reveal, through the King of Foo blog, through interviews, through production notes, and the one the fans excavated, by tracking the snail's eye colour across hundreds of episodes, by noticing Golb's tongue in Poohoy, by connecting the Jake tattoo in Obsidian to what it meant before Together Again confirmed it. The relationship between these two types of iceberg is part of what makes the Adventure Time fan community extraordinary. The wiki, Adventure Time Wiki on Fandom, is one of the most comprehensive and carefully maintained wikis for any animated show. Every episode has a detailed page with notes on animation errors, production trivia, cultural references, lore implications, and community theories. The community found the snail. They found Golb's tongue in Poohoy. They found the Shoko treehouse connection. They found the Jake memorial tattoo, before together again confirmed what it meant. They catalogued the exquisite corpse writing process. They documented Ward's departure from the showrunner role. This is the fan community as archaeological team, excavating the iceberg item by item, building a map of what's down there, and the show's creators were aware of this. The King of Fu Tumblr is not an accident. It's the production team providing context and detail to a community they knew was paying attention. The iceberg exists because the show built it. The map of the iceberg exists because fans dug for it. Good night. Subscribe. Come back when you want to go deeper. There is always more below the waterline. Let me trace the full Jake death sequence because the way the show told it, piece by piece, across specials, in background details before foreground confirmations, is itself an example of the iceberg technique at work. The main series ends with "Come Along With Me" on September 3rd, 2018. Jake is alive and present in the finale. His death happens off-screen, in the gap between the finale and the Distant Lands specials. The show never shows you Jake dying, it shows you the consequences of his having died. Obsidian, HBO Max, 2020. Adult Finn appears to support Marceline and PB during the Glass Kingdom crisis. He's not the main story, he's background support for the main characters. And on Adult Finn's chest, if you look, a tattoo of Jake surrounded by flowers. The show has established visual language for memorials. Flowers around an image is how you mark someone who is gone. The tattoo is not labelled. Nobody in the episode says that's Jake's memorial tattoo. The episode is primarily about Marceline and PB. The Finn appearance is brief. If the main plot held your attention, and it should have, you probably didn't pause on Adult Finn long enough to read the detail of what was on his chest. The show told you Jake was dead in 2020. It told you in a tattoo on a background character in a special about different characters. It didn't wait for you to be ready. It put the information in a place you might miss. Together Again, HBO Max, 2021. Finn dies. Jake died before this special. Exactly when is unspecified. But before, Finn spends the special searching for Jake across the dead worlds. They find each other. Jake's ghost has been assigned to a higher dead world than Finn's. They choose to reincarnate together. If you saw Obsidian before Together Again, and remembered the tattoo, everything in Together Again arrived with different weight, not surprise. Recognition. The feeling of a thing you half knew being confirmed. That's what the tattoo meant. If you didn't remember the tattoo, Together Again was the first time you knew, but the show had been trying to tell you a year earlier. This is the show's central technique at the scale of a multi-year rollout across specials. The information is placed before you're ready for it. The full meaning arrives later. The gap between the placement and the meaning is where the iceberg lives. The same structure works at the episode level. The Creeps, placing Shoko's ghost before the Vault, names her. And at the season level, the snail's possessed eyes in Season 3, before the significance of the possession was fully established. And now, at the multi-year Distant Lands level, the memorial tattoo in Obsidian, before Together Again, explains it. The show did this consistently, at every scale, across its entire run, placed information before meaning, trusted the viewer to either catch it in the moment or find it retroactively, never repeated or underlined what it placed, just left it there and moved on. Now let me talk about what the iceberg technique requires of you as a viewer. The show was built with the assumption that some viewers would watch once, casually, and enjoy the surface, and some viewers would watch multiple times, attentively, and find the layers. And some viewers would watch casually, and then return years later with more context, and find things they missed the first time. All three types of viewing are valid. The show was built to work for all three, but the iceberg, the specific experience of finding something you missed, is only available to the third type, the viewer who comes back, who has more context than they did the first time, who sees the same frame they saw before, and sees it differently because they now know something they didn't know. That's why the snail with possessed eyes works as an iceberg item. You saw the snail waving, you smiled, you moved on. You came back later knowing the lich was in the snail. The smile didn't go away. The snail is still cute. The waving is still charming. But now, both things are true at once, and the frame contains more than it did. That's the structure the iceberg is documenting. Not secrets, but depth. The show has depth available at multiple layers for multiple types of attention. The iceberg is the map of those layers for viewers who want to go looking. And here's the thing about maps. They don't tell you everything that's in the territory. A map of the iceberg is still an iceberg. There's always more below the last layer you've documented. Always something the community hasn't found yet, or something the show placed that doesn't fit any existing category. The Golb tongue in Puhoi wasn't in any iceberg list when it was first noticed. Someone rewatched the episode knowing about GOLB, recognized the tongue, and that became part of the community's map. Before that discovery, it was below the mapped layers. After it, it was part of the iceberg. New iceberg items are still being found. The community is still finding them, 15 years after the show premiered, because the show was built with enough depth that 15 years of attentive viewing hasn't reached the actual bottom. That's what makes Adventure Time's iceberg different from most shows' icebergs. Most shows have a bottom. Adventure Time keeps going, which means the snail might still be waving at you with something in its eyes that you haven't understood yet. Good night. The list is at 15. Subscribe. Come back when you want to go looking for more. Let me now spend time on the production layer of the iceberg that most people miss completely, because the creative history of Adventure Time is as interesting as the lore and is much less discussed. The exquisite corpse writing process, where writers contribute to a story without seeing what came before, explains things about Adventure Time that would otherwise seem like inconsistencies. The show has a reputation for feeling both deeply planned and sometimes chaotically improvised. Both things are true. There are elements that were clearly designed. The Simon and Marceline backstory, built carefully by Rebecca Sugar across multiple episodes. There are elements that seem to have emerged from accumulated decisions. The snow giant that appears in early seasons and is never explained. Various background characters who appear with specific, detailed designs, suggesting full story histories that the show never explores. The way certain geographical features of O are established with enormous detail in one episode and then never referenced again. These feel like the products of a creative process that was adding detail faster than any single person could track. Ward described his vision for the show's background world as Candyland on the surface and dark underneath. This is the exact description of an iceberg, and the creative process that built the deeper layers. Writers handing off to other writers, exquisite corpse building on itself, storyboard artists adding their own philosophical and emotional material to the story beats they were given. That process is itself an iceberg. There's more in the show than any individual person put there deliberately. Some of the iceberg is intentional design. Some of it is accumulated creative sediment. The fan community has been excavating both types for 15 years and still finding things. The snail was deliberate. Ward established the challenge, and the production committed to it. The lich possession through the snail was narrative continuity applied to an existing Easter egg, deliberate in execution, but emerging from an Easter egg not originally conceived for that purpose. The 37th Dead World number being honoured in Together Again, a decade later, may have been careful continuity mapping, or may have been a writer checking the records and deciding to honour the specificity already there. The iceberg doesn't just have depth, it has texture. Parts of it are smooth and deliberate, parts are rough and accidental, and the texture they produce together is what makes exploring the iceberg different from simply reading a lore Bible. You have to ask, was this planned or accumulated? And the answer may not be one or the other. It may be both at once, or it may be impossible to know. That's the iceberg, being honest about itself. Now let me address Orgolog's arc completely, because the full version is richer than the summary I gave earlier. Orgolog, the Breaker of Worlds, was a primordial being of enormous cosmic power. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, had Grob Gob Glob Grod incapacitate him thousands of years before the show's present. The incapacitation didn't kill Orgolog, it compressed him. The Earth's gravity pressed his enormous cosmic form into a penguin shape. Orgolog, the Breaker of Worlds, became Gunter the Penguin, not through any deliberate act of concealment. Gunter apparently had no conscious memory of being Orgolog for most of the show's run. The compression was total enough that he genuinely became Gunter, not a Breaker of Worlds pretending to be a penguin, but a penguin who had been a Breaker of Worlds and retained only echoes of it. Those echoes are what the show planted for attentive viewers. Gunter, appearing slightly more aware than a penguin should be. Gunter's occasional moments of behaviour that don't fit the domestic pet role. The specific unease Gunter creates in episodes where he appears. In Season 6, during the Orgolog arc, the memories begin reasserting. Gunter starts accessing Orgolog's awareness. When Orgolog fully emerges, He's defeated by Finn, which is itself significant, that a 12-year-old boy can defeat a breaker of worlds, a detail that connects to Finn's own cosmic identity as an incarnation of the Catalyst comet. And then the finale. Gunter finds the reset crown, his deepest wish, not to be Orgolorg, not to shatter worlds, not to absorb comets and become a cosmic god, is to be the Ice King, the being that once terrified Abraham Lincoln's government on Mars wants, more than anything, to continue being the ridiculous ice wizard that nobody likes. Centuries of domestic existence inside a compressed form produced something the breaker of worlds never was, someone with preferences, someone who had built attachments to a specific set of daily circumstances, someone whose deepest wish was for continuity rather than power. That's either the most complete possible portrait of how relationships and routine change a person over time, or it's a cosmic joke about the most terrifying entities in the universe being undone by spending too much time with an emotionally needy ice wizard. The show gives you both readings simultaneously. You were watching the Ice King's penguin become the new Ice King. You were watching one of the oldest beings in Adventure Time's cosmology choose domesticity over cosmic power. Let me now address the Together Again finale more completely, because it's the most explicit statement the show ever made about what it was always building toward. Finn and Jake die separately. They end up in different dead worlds. The special is structured around Finn searching for Jake across the afterlife system, with an emotional reality that the show has been building toward since the first episode. The specific detail I want, the clapping rhythm. In James Baxter the Horse, Season 5, Episode 19, there's a moment where Jake, concerned that they might die while fighting a ghost, performs a rhythmic clap and tells Finn to listen for that sound if they're ever separated in the dead worlds. It's a small moment in an episode about a horse on a beach ball. It's played as Jake being slightly morbid in the middle of a comedy. In Together Again, when Finn is searching for Jake in the afterlife, he uses that specific rhythmic clap to find him. The show planted that in 2013 in an episode about making people happy through art, in a moment that appears to be Jake being goofy, and paid it off 8 years later in a special about Finn searching for his dead best friend in the afterlife. This is the Iceberg at the scale of cross-decade narrative planning. The clapping was there in 2013. If you rewatched James Baxter the Horse after Together Again, you'd see Jake teaching Finn how to find each other when one of them dies, in the middle of a comedy episode about a horse, and the weight of that moment would be completely different from how it landed the first time. You were watching Jake be goofy. You were watching Jake plan for his own death and its aftermath. Both were true at the same time. The show did this with Simon's journal pages, with the snail's possessed eyes, with the Jake memorial tattoo, with Golb's tongue in Puhoi, and with the clapping rhythm in James Baxter the Horse. The same technique across every scale of the show's narrative. Information placed before meaning. Trust that the viewer would either catch it or come back. That trust is the show's most consistent quality, not the darkness, not the comedy, not even the emotional depth. The trust. The show trusted that if it built something well enough, people would find their way to it. And 15 years later, people are still finding things. Good night. The list is at 15. Subscribe. Come back. There is always more below the waterline. One more thing about Puhoi before we close. The episode is doing something with time that rewards being stated plainly. In narrative time, Finn spent decades in the pillow world. In screen time, you spent 11 minutes. The show compresses decades of a life into a standard-length episode, and then erases those decades for Finn in seconds, and then continues to the next week, as if the episode didn't happen. Finn's amnesia is not just a question for Finn, it's a question for you as a viewer. The show showed you something complete, and then told you the character who just lived it has no memory of it. What do you do with that? Where does that episode live in your understanding of the show's narrative? The show doesn't ask this. It just makes it happen and continues. And there's a structural parallel between Puhoi and the show's broader relationship with its viewers. Adventure Time ran for 10 seasons and built something enormous. Most viewers caught pieces of it, some episodes here and there, some seasons more than others, some mythology and some not. Very few viewers saw everything, and among those who did, very few caught everything the show placed in the background. The show, like the pillow world, continued whether or not anyone was watching closely enough to see all of it. The details were there. The snail had possessed eyes. Golb's tongue was in the transition. The Jake tattoo was on adult Finn's chest. Whether you saw them or not didn't change that they were placed. That's a strange kind of authorial confidence. The confidence to build something, knowing it might not be seen, knowing that most viewers will never go back with the right information to understand what they missed, building it anyway. That confidence is the thing that makes the Adventure Time iceberg worth exploring. The show believed enough in the depth it was building to build it for the viewers who would never come, not just for the community that would excavate it, for the hypothetical viewer who watches Pooh Hoy, knowing about Golby, who returns to the creeps, knowing about Shoko, who sees the Jake tattoo in obsidian in the moment and pauses on it and understands immediately. That viewer exists. The show built for that viewer, and you, watching this right now, are closer to being that viewer than you were at the start. The snail is still waving, the lich is still inside it, the Pillow World family is still there. Subscribe, come back, there's always more. Good night. Let me make sure we've covered every item from the community iceberg I referenced at the start. The Imgi Flip community iceberg I found in research listed these layers: Fiona and Cake, Finn is colorblind, the snail, Martin Merton's brain damage, Cosmic Owl based on a toilet, Gunter's age at 8,383,939,300,202 years old, Simon's immortality, Finn's past lives, Jake is dead in obsidian, Golb in Pooh Hoy, The Tree Trunk's Children, James Baxter, kingofu.tumblr.com. Adventure Time was originally Nickelodeon, Finn's voice actor, the pilot episode, Primordial Creatures, the 37th Dead World, PB's future imprisonment, the Pillow World's fate, and the deer. I've covered most of these. Let me address the ones I haven't. Gunter's age. The community iceberg lists 8,383,939,302 years as Gunter's confirmed age. This connects to the Orgalorg reveal. Orgalorg is an ancient primordial being, and if his age has been calculated or estimated within the show's cosmology, it would be measured in the billions of years. The Earth is approximately 4.5 billion years old, an entity that attempted to absorb a catalyst comet before Abraham Lincoln's government existed on Mars, is operating in geological and cosmic time. The specific number, 8,383,939,300,202 years, appears in some fan community discussions as a calculated estimate based on when Orgalorg was incapacitated. Whether this is confirmed in the show itself or a community calculation from available data isn't entirely clear, but the general point holds. Gunter is a being of cosmic age inhabiting a penguin body, and the penguin body was waiting with a being of that age inside it across every Ice King episode. Simon's immortality. Simon Petrikov is technically immortal because of the crown. It sustains him even as it destroys him. By Holly Jolly Secrets, Simon has been alive for at least the duration between the Mushroom War and the present, approximately 1,000 years. He aged during the Mushroom War period and then stopped aging as the crown's power fully took hold. The specific horror of Simon's immortality: he experienced the gradual replacement of himself with the Ice King while still being alive to experience it. The crown doesn't kill you. It replaces you while keeping you alive to watch the replacement happen. By the time enough Ice King has displaced enough Simon, the remaining Simon is too diminished to fully know what was lost. Finn's voice actor. The full story. Jeremy Shadder is Finn. He's been Finn since the Cartoon Network series began. His older brother Zach Shadder was Penn in the 2008 Nickelodeon pilot. The production team didn't initially realize they were brothers. Jeremy was 12 when the show premiered. He's now in his mid-20s. Jonathan Frakes, Commander Riker from Star Trek: The Next Generation, voices adult alternate Finn in Season 5 episodes, Pooh Hoy and Dungeon Train. David Bradley, Argus Filch in Harry Potter, Walder Frey in Game of Thrones, voices elderly Finn in Together Again. The voice of Finn across ages is a progression from Jeremy Shadder's 12-year-old voice, through Jonathan Frakes' middle-aged voice, to David Bradley's elderly voice, a complete human life, tracked through 3 actors, across the show's run, and Into the Distant Lands specials, PB's future imprisonment. This is a detail from the show's implied future timeline. At various points, the show suggests, through flash-forwards and timeline references, that Princess Bubblegum, at some point in the far future, faces imprisonment or removal from power. The specific mechanism and context are not made explicit in the main series. The Distant Lands specials don't fully address it either. It exists as a piece of implied future history that the show gestured at without completing. This is the Iceberg at its most deliberately fragmentary, a future event implied but not shown, waiting in a timeline the show never visited. Now let me close with the thing that ties all of these items together, because the individual items, the snail, the Pillow World family, Golb's tongue, the Jake tattoo, Gunter as Orgalorg, are not actually what the Iceberg is about. What the Iceberg is about is a show's relationship with attention. Adventure Time was built with the conviction that attention is the thing you give to things that matter, and that if you build something well enough, with enough genuine depth and consistency and care, you will attract the attention of people who can find that depth, and those people will build a community of attention around the show, and that community of attention will sustain the show's meaning long after the show has ended. The snail with possessed eyes in Season 3 is an act of respect toward that community of attention. The production team said, "We know someone will check the snail's eyes. We're going to make it worth their time to check." Golb's tongue in Puhoi, 4 years before Golb was named, is an act of respect toward that community of attention. The production team said, "We know someone will re-watch Puhoi after learning about GOLB and notice this. We're going to place it so it's real when they find it." The Jake Memorial tattoo in Obsidian is an act of respect toward that community of attention. The production team said, "We know someone is going to pause on adult Finn and read the detail of what's on his chest. We're going to make that pause meaningful." The Iceberg is the record of that respect and that response. The show built it. The community found it. The relationship between those two acts is what gives the Iceberg its weight. You are part of that community of attention. You came here and spent this time going through the layers. That means the show worked. It built something deep enough that there were things for you to find, and you went looking. The snail was waving at you. The lich was inside the snail. You know that now. And the next time you see the snail waving, in whatever episode, in whatever rewatch, you'll see both things at once. That's the Iceberg. That's what it was always for. Subscribe. The list is at 15. Come back when you want to go deeper. Good night. There is one more layer I want to trace. The finale itself as Iceberg item. Come along with me. The series finale, aired September 3rd, 2018, ends with a flash forward to a far future. Shermie and Beth, a young boy and girl, having adventures in a changed ooh. They find Finn's golden arm, the prosthetic from the end of the show's run, and Jake's love letter to Lady Rainicorn. They take the pose that Finn and Jake take in the title sequence. The adventure continues. Not with Finn and Jake specifically, with the principle they embodied. Shermie and Beth embody it now. This is the show using its own ending as an Iceberg item. The surface. The finale resolves the plot and gives you closure. Below the surface, the finale is arguing that the closing of this particular story is not an ending, but a handoff. The adventure was never about Finn and Jake specifically. It was always about the attitude, the willingness to say yes to the world as it is, to run through the ruins like they're the best possible place to be, to help. Because helping is what you do when you're capable of it, and someone needs it. Shermie and Beth have that attitude. Finn and Jake had it. Eventually someone else will. Together again, then confirms. Shermie and Beth are the reincarnations of Finn and Jake, the souls that chose to come back, the eternal return. In the show's specific terms, they chose to return to the conditions of adventure and service and loss and love. Yes to all of it. Again, the flash forward in the finale is the first frame of that story. Together again fills it in. And if you watched the finale knowing together again, if you saw Shermie and Beth and understood that those were Finn and Jake's souls in new bodies, the close of the title sequence at the end of Come Along With Me arrives with completely different weight than it had on first viewing. You were watching the end of a show. You were watching the beginning of a new iteration of the same story. Both were true at the same time. This is the Iceberg's final technique. The ending that is also a beginning. The closure that is also an opening. The farewell that is also see you next time. The show ended and the show kept going in different bodies, in a different time, with the same two souls running through ruins together. Finn chose his meat existence over cosmic transcendence in the season 6 finale, and then he lived that existence through to its end. And then he chose to come back, to do it again, in a new form, in a changed world, but with Jake, with the same friend, with the same relationship that the show was always really about. That's the bottom of the iceberg, not darkness and not horror, the choice to return, the willingness to say, this world, this life, this partnership, worth having again, even knowing everything, even knowing about the snail and the pillow world and the missing arm and Golb's tongue and all of it, especially knowing all of it, worth having again. Subscribe. The list is at 15. Come back when you need to. Good night. Before we truly close, I want to address the clapping detail from James Baxter the horse one more time, because I mentioned it, and I don't think I gave it enough room. James Baxter the horse, Season 5, Episode 19, aired May 6th, 2013, is primarily an episode about finding your own way to create joy rather than copying someone else's. Jake and Finn try to imitate James Baxter and fail. They develop their own act. They discover it works when it's theirs. That's the episode. That's what it's doing thematically. Buried inside it, when Finn and Jake are fighting the ghost of the deceased individual and things go badly, Jake pulls Finn aside and performs a specific rhythmic clap. He tells Finn, if they die and get separated in the 9th Dead World, listen for that sound, follow it to find him. In 2013, this lands as Jake being slightly morbid in the middle of a comedy, a gag about Jake taking an extreme but characteristically Jake-shaped approach to planning for death. You laugh and move on. In 2021, Together Again shows Finn in the afterlife, searching for Jake, using that specific rhythmic clap to find him. The show planted the location-finding technique in 2013. 8 years of the show continued, then a special in which Finn needs to find Jake in the afterlife used exactly what Jake planted in 2013 to find him. The production team knew about James Baxter the horse. They went back to it. They said, the clapping is the way Finn finds Jake. We're going to honor it. Go back to James Baxter the horse, knowing this. The moment where Jake teaches Finn the clapping rhythm changes completely. It's no longer Jake being goofy about death in the middle of a comedy episode. It's Jake, 8 years before he dies, teaching Finn how to find him. You were watching Jake be dramatic. You were watching Jake leave Finn instructions for after Jake's death. Both were true at the same time. The show just needed 8 more years to show you the second reading. That's the Adventure Time Iceberg at its most patient. Not secrets hidden in backgrounds. Not possessed snail eyes that require close inspection. Not Golb's tongue in a transition sequence. A joke in a comedy episode that becomes a lifeline in a special about death and love and choosing to come back. And it was always both things simultaneously. From the moment it aired, waiting for the context that would reveal the second reading. You can go back now. You have the context. The clapping rhythm in James Baxter the horse means something different than it did. Everything I've shown you tonight means something different than it did. That's the iceberg. That's what it was always for. Good night. The list is at 15. Subscribe. Come back. There is always more below the waterline. And one last thing, because it's the detail that ties everything together. The show's title, Adventure Time. Not the adventures of Finn and Jake. Not Land of Ooh. Not even Finn the human. Adventure Time. A concept, not a character or a place. The title says, there is a time for this. This is the time for adventure. It's been said from the beginning. Every time the title appeared. Every cold open. Every episode. Adventure Time. The time in which adventure happens. The time in which you say yes to the world. The show ends. The adventure continues. In Shermie and Beth. In the next iteration. In whoever picks up the golden arm and strikes the pose. The snail waves. The lich is inside it. The show is both of those things at once. The surface and the depth. The wave and the possession. The adventure and what's buried beneath the adventure. Adventure Time. The time is always now. Good night. And because the iceberg always has one more layer below, where you think the bottom is, one more thing the show placed that rewards going back. In the title sequence, after Adventure Time, come on, grab your friends, we'll go to very distant lands. After the candy-coloured world, after Finn and Jake running, after the Candy Kingdom towers, and Jake's face in the clouds, and all of it, there is a small detail that most people miss completely. There are ruins, not dramatic ruins, not foregrounded. In the background, in the landscape Finn and Jake are running through, there are collapsed structures and broken things, and the evidence of what came before. The show tells you every time it opens that you are watching what happens after something ended, not before, after. And Finn runs through it like it's the most fun place in the world, because for him, it is. The ruins are just home. The aftermath of everything is just where he lives. He doesn't know what the candy-colored landscape was built on top of. He doesn't know about the Mushroom War the way we come to know about it. He just runs through it. You ran through it with him. Every episode, every time the title sequence played, you were watching a boy run through ruins. You were watching the show's entire argument that you can say yes to a world built on catastrophe, that the aftermath of everything can still be a place where adventures happen and friends run together, and the time is always adventure time, condensed into 30 seconds of title sequence animation, repeated every episode for 10 seasons. You saw it every time. Now you know what you were seeing. Good night. Subscribe. The list is at 15. Come back. There is always more below the waterline. There always will be. Let me give proper treatment to the James Baxter production origin story, because telling it in full is worth doing. James Baxter, the human animator, was delivering a guest lecture at CalArts, the California Institute of the Arts. While Pendleton Ward was a student there, Baxter was demonstrating animation techniques. A student in the audience made a request: animate a horse balancing on a beach ball. Baxter declined. He said he'd animate something simpler. But the image, a horse on a beach ball, fixed itself in Ward's memory and stayed there. Years later, Adventure Time is in production. Baxter calls Ward, offers to do animation work if the show ever needs it. They meet at a sandwich shop in Burbank. Ward pitches the character, a horse who travels through ooh, making people happy by balancing on a beach ball and whinnying his own name. Baxter said yes. He was flattered. He also said yes to voicing the character, spending half an hour in a recording studio saying his own name in different ways, trying to be horsey and British, the whinny being him trying not to cough while making horse sounds. The episode aired May 6th, 2013, Season 5, Episode 19. The character moves differently from everything else in the show, more fluid, more graceful, because it was animated by a master of fluid, graceful animation. When the AV Club called it a meta-commentary on the nature of Adventure Time itself, they were right in a precise way. The episode is about finding your own way to create joy rather than copying someone else's. And the character at the center of the episode was created by someone finding his own way to create joy, in the most literal possible sense. James Baxter, the human, was asked to animate something he chose not to animate at a CalArts lecture. Years later, the image he chose not to create became one of the most beloved characters in an animated series. He then animated that character, voiced it, and received credit as the human behind the horse. The image he didn't create in the lecture became something he created for the show. The refusal became the origin, and you watched it without knowing any of this. The horse was just a horse on a beach ball, making people happy, neighing its name, which it also was, genuinely, both true at once. That's the James Baxter story. That's the iceberg within the iceberg. Not just that the character has a real person behind it, but that the real person's refusal of a student request at CalArts is what created the character. Every time James Baxter the horse appears in Adventure Time, he is the consequence of a no that became a yes across the span of a career and a friendship. You were watching a horse on a beach ball. You were watching the downstream effect of a moment in a CalArts lecture room. Good night, truly this time. Subscribe, 15 titles, come back. And because the iceberg goes one layer deeper every time you think you've found the bottom, the very last thing, the snail in the pilot episode doesn't appear. The Adventure Time wiki confirms the snail is hidden in almost every episode of Adventure Time, excluding the pilot, food chain, the wand, obsidian, and the Frog Seasons shorts. In certain early episodes where the snail was inadvertently omitted, the production retroactively inserted it for reruns and home video releases. The snail's absence from Obsidian is particularly striking. Obsidian, the special where adult Finn appears with the Jake memorial tattoo, where the show tells you Jake is dead, does not have the waving snail. The show's consistent visual Easter egg, the thing that was in every episode, is absent from the special where the show marks Jake's death. Whether that's coincidence or deliberate, whether someone decided the snail shouldn't wave in the episode that carries the Jake memorial, is unknown. The show doesn't answer this, but the pattern is available. The snail waves in every episode. The snail is absent from Obsidian. Obsidian is the episode where the show tells you Jake is gone. You are watching the presence of the waving snail as confirmation that this is the world you know, that things are normal, that the Easter egg is in place. The absence of the snail from Obsidian, if it was deliberate, is the show telling you, in the most subtle register possible, that something is different. Something is missing. Jake is missing. The snail is missing. Both are true at the same time. If they're connected, the show didn't say so. It just left the pattern available. That's the absolute bottom of the iceberg, not a confirmed fact. A possible connection between two confirmed facts that the show left for you to find and evaluate yourself. The snail waves in every episode. The snail doesn't wave in the episode where the show tells you Jake is dead. You were watching an Easter egg's presence or absence. You might have been watching the show grieve. Good night. The list is at 15. Subscribe. Come back whenever you need to. There is always more below the waterline. Subscribe. Good night.